welcome, Jasmine, to our podcast.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Um, so I guess to get started, just tell us what you do and kind of how you've gotten into the field that you're into now.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Jasmine Winkler. I am a certified permaculture designer. I've been a certified permaculture designer for the past 4 years. Originally, I was a security officer in Orlando, Florida, and it kind of was feeding into that rat race consumerism mentality, and it wasn't nourishing my soul. One day, I decided to hand over my keys and my badge, like I said, after 7 years, and I had been promoted to supervisor at that time, and it was just not fulfilling. I ended up taking a month in Costa Rica to get my permaculture design certification, and then started farming and growing my own food full time after that. Um, So long journey getting into permaculture design and what that means for me on a personal level, because I was also really sick, really overweight, and it came down to lifestyle choices. And through that lifestyle choice discovery came permaculture and more holistic healing when it came to not just physical health, but mental health and healing the environment. So it was really this all-encompassing umbrella of information through permaculture design. And I started to design my life that way. And I wanted to create a life that was fulfilling for me and my community and my fellow tribe, essentially. And I started teaching permaculture and designing permaculture gardens for people in the Charlotte and surrounding areas of North Carolina. So I met with a bunch of really cool people who inspired me. Sarah Wu is an herbalist. And then Stephen Brooks is a permaculture designer. David Algram, who does some classes here in the US and overseas. World-renowned permaculture designer, taken some immersion courses with him, continuing that education so I can share that information with other people. But specifically through that, I created this company, Down to Earth Co-op and Lifestyle Center, because I was really looking for a place to bring all of the facets of permaculture together. You say permaculture, a lot of people don't really know what that means. And some people will give you a different explanation of what that means for them. So for me personally, I always say that permaculture is an ecological and philosophical design construct. It's not only applicable to agriculture, farming, and gardening practices, not just homesteading. It really is a lifestyle. It's how we can.
Well, it's in the word, isn't it?
Say that again?
It's in the word, isn't it?
A permanent culture.
Yeah.
It's whatever.
To me, that doesn't just say. And yeah, who was the founder of it?
Bill Moles.
I had the full workbook. Yeah, and he talks about it in a very holistic way, and not just in terms of just agriculture, but how all these different systems affect one another.
Yeah, and really reconstructing our societal systems to kind of replicate that through, the permaculture principles and ethics of permaculture, and how, we work together as a community, locally and nationally and internationally. So it really is a way for all of us to kind of move through our lives and reconstruct these social systems that we're so used to. So with that, and my company, Down to Earth Co-op and Lifestyle Center, we do permaculture design services, but we also offer other things, like I said, promoting other businesses who also promote holistic, natural lifestyles. So we promote Ardor Grove Botanicals, who does all natural skincare line, wilderness survival experts, Jeffrey Santos. We work together with him, offering classes and workshops in bladesmithing, and really getting the community together. We have a couple projects going on in regards to workshops for networking purposes, and then installations of local market gardens to get this produce to chefs in Charlotte, essentially. I'm also a certified wild mushroom forager, Mushrooms are so magical and so exciting for me.
Cool.
I love bringing this kind of elusive culinary delight to people who have never had that experience before.
Do you mostly forage them, or do you grow them yourself too?
So we are doing some cultivation projects. We have a mushroom inoculation.
I definitely want to be involved in that.
Awesome. Yeah, we have a project going on. We're going to be inoculating about 25 shiitake mushroom logs towards the end of October. It does take a while for them to fruit, but part of this class, you get to inoculate your own log, take it home with you, and then we're setting up cultivation racks to be able to provide those shiitake mushrooms to chefs in the Charlotte and surrounding areas. So we do cultivation as well as wild mushroom.
I know in my group on Facebook, I got some kickback because I did this article on hydroponics, and some of the permaculturists were like, "Oh, hydroponics is bad," and I was like, I mean, I think you kind of got to look at like I'm huge into permaculture, but I think there's different solutions for different things, and it's not a one size fits all.
Absolutely.
I think anything's better than what we currently do. So right. I mean, as much as I love permaculture, I don't know if permaculture can completely solve for all of the world's food problems right now. But it's like, I think in the long term it will, but I think we almost are past the point. Right. We should have done permaculture like a long time ago. And we're going to have some solutions that are like, we can ramp up real fast too. And I think maybe hydroponics and stuff might offer some of those solutions too. So it's almost like, whereas renewables, it's hard to maybe just go straight solar, but we might have to incorporate some nuclear in the short term.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be some like transitional phases through that. But just getting into that mindset, I would often hear in my permaculture courses to put on your permaculture lenses, and then it just becomes a new way of looking at the world. And like you said, finding the solution, what works best for your environment, your local ecology, your community, what works best for you that still withholds the ethics of permaculture.
Some of the, I took the permaculture design course. You did in Costa Rica. It sounds like yours is probably a lot cooler. It was on a hands-on level. I did like an online through like the Nashville permaculture thing. I had to do an online project and stuff, but I was pretty excited because, just that I made it through it, because it was this enormous book of things.
I'm sure that would be a totally different experience. Because mine was full immersion course, living off the grid on 90 acres, no electricity.
It's a lot harder to stay engaged in an online class. It took me It gave me a year to take it, or I would like lose my money. And so it took me like 4 months. And that was not working on full time. I mean, because I kept having to remotivate myself. Yeah. I would highly recommend, if anybody wants to do a permaculture class, probably go your route if you can, if your resources allow you to. Yeah, absolutely. I think an immersion into like hands-on learning and stuff is the best way to go. But if you're like me, and I was working full time, I had all these things to pay at the time, bills and all this kind of stuff. I just couldn't find the time to do something like that. Sometimes life just is like that. And I was able to like kind of, get into something I was very passionate about with the spare hours in each day. Yeah. And they gave me a full year to get this course done. And it wasn't actually that much coursework. There's a lot of reading.
And those opportunities are really great. Like you said, you're making your way given the circumstance that you have, and everybody is kind of facing different circumstances. And another kind of intention with my company, Down to Earth, is to make that more accessible. So it doesn't have to be, the 2 weeks of full immersion. It's something that maybe you could do a weekly or monthly meetup. Like
a workshop that you would go out to on a weekend?
Exactly. Yeah. 1 or 2 days, even, 3 days for the weekend, camp out on site, and really just commune that way and immerse yourself in that lifestyle, essentially.
That's actually one of the big goals of me with my business is, we do e-commerce right now. We produce a lot of content on video, podcast, blogs and stuff. But I would like to have a physical space at some point. and do workshops, have people come out, learn different things. Maybe we could do some partnership.
Yeah, I would love to collaborate on stuff like that. I work with, I have a client in Kershaw actually on over 1,000 acres of land, and most of that land she bought just to protect it. And she does that in South American countries. She's got thousands of acres in Jamaica just because of deforestation and understanding that these, lands need to be protected. So I'm working with her creating an eco-village in Kershaw. Excuse me.
Where's that? Where's Kershaw?
In Kershaw, South Carolina.
Oh, okay.
So I'd say an hour and a half from Charlotte, south of Charlotte.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, incorporating kind of an eco-village type dynamic out there, and being able to offer those classes. But I also want to demonstrate through my business that it can be profitable. I think food provisions is a very, very noble profession, and we've kind of devalued that over the past 50 years. Food provisions, being able to provide food and sustenance to
You're
people.
talking about farmers have been devalued, right?
Yes.
That's one thing I always I'd like to get into farming, and it's if you get into commodity farming, you don't make hardly any money.
Monocrops.
And you're just reliant essentially almost on the government at that point to subsidize a lot of these things. Mm-hmm. And so soybeans, corn, all this kind of stuff, I would never want to do that. Plus it's terrible for the land.
Right.
But if I would love to and to me this is what permaculture is instead of if you're wanting to get into monoculture, you got to get as much land as possible. It's probably not even profitable as a first generation farmer to even do that anymore. I know somebody that is, the only reason they're able to be an organic farmer is because they inherited that land.
Right.
So good luck to anybody trying to get in now.
Right.
But if you took a small piece of land, and this is to me is what permaculture is, and you maximize what you can get out of it, and you just completely cycle the nutrients as much as you can. Yeah, obviously, there is things leaving the system if you're selling anything. But, I just feel like, and then you slowly build that up. I feel like people need to start smaller and learn how to take care of a smaller piece of land and then build up instead of just trying to jump in and having that diversity allows you can make a lot more money per square foot with a very well-diverse, very well thought out plot of land than if you just, put all these pesticides and nitrogen and you dump all these substances on it to make it somewhat fertile, and then you just harvest it.
Yeah. So really it becomes more of that cyclical process of, the land's feeding you and you're feeding the land and being able to kind of cultivate each other. But even going deeper than that and looking at the zones of permaculture, and they say zone 0, 0, or some people just say zone 0 is yourself. Yeah. And being able to, maximize your own efficiency and looking at it as far as the input.
Can you elaborate on the zone? I don't think a lot of people probably understand what that is and how it kind of radiates out.
Sure.
So tree, right?
The way that we use the zones in permaculture design when we're designing, whether it be a homestead, a farm plot, a community garden, whatever it may be, we're going to design that in kind of concentric zones. They don't necessarily have to be concentric, but it's just looking at it from a place of utilization. Where do we spend our most time? What needs our most attention? And that's where we're going to kind of put most of our energy is into that primary space. And if you're talking about a homestead design, typically that's going to be your house. That's where you're cooking, you're sleeping, you're spending most of your time in your home. So essentially that's going to need your most attention. And then from there, it's going to be your outside space, the outside, kitchen garden, something that you might frequent once or twice a day, but you're still giving it that energy and the attention that it needs. And the further out you go into these zones and designing your property or your life, you just kind of look at it as the further out you go in that zone, the less attention is actually required from you.
So you might plant some walnut trees like further away because you're not going to harvest those very often. And
they don't need as much management. Yeah, so they don't need as much energy input. So usually that wildlife area, that kind of perimeter where your homestead meets
some mushrooms,
a forested area. Yeah, that's exactly where you're gonna put those. But referring back to zone 0 and the self, that's really important, because if you're not functioning well and you're not putting in the right inputs, you're not going to get out the right outputs. So
you got to keep this house in order.
Exactly. And that's just going to allow those other zones to function a lot better. So very, very important when it comes to permaculture design.
I get that. So I think it's interesting how I think we got into it for different reasons. For you, permaculture was about how do I protect my life and how do I live a better, higher quality life? How do I get my house in order in terms of like eating well and having access to good food? I think mine was probably, I've always had like kind of the engineering, like, the bigger the problem, the more you need a solution and stuff like that. And like you want to step up to the challenge and stuff. I remember like studying in school, I came at it from more the renewable energy side. I remember in the 90s, like getting stuff about solar cars and all this stuff that seemed like pipe dreams. And it was like, oh, that's going to be like 150 years in the future. That'll be cool.
Right around the corner. It's here. Yeah. And it's great that we can look at permaculture from different perspectives of passion, because that's what's going to really create that movement, because there are so many different facets and implementations of what permaculture is and what that means to people. So having, that different perspective and different kind of ways to look for a solution, that's such a beautiful thing. And like you said, bringing those people together is absolutely utmost important. Yeah.
I actually feel like our motives weren't that different if you consider, like yours were more maybe like physical health and mine was more like mental health.
Yeah.
I was like, I need this.
And it feeds into all of that, the mental health aspects, the physical and even emotional health and spiritual health, and reconnecting with nature and each other and community.
I think that's one of the biggest parts we don't like that aren't stressed with permaculture. Is one of the things that has attracted me to it. I mean, I love farming and gardening and all that kind of stuff, but that by itself, it's really like, I think a lot of people nowadays, especially millennials, because we're on this cusp of like we know what it's like pre-cell phone. I talk about this all the time, and it's like how like we were talking about people being buried in their phones and kids now, and I'm just like, oh my, I find myself as 31-year-old being like, oh, this is how it used to be all the time.
Yeah.
And it really is to me about like we need to get back to some sort, and we need to have these physical connections and these connections with human beings. I'm not shunning technology, but technology can be used to bring us together more so than what it's been used for.
And it's really interesting. We're kind of going through this, we're still in this like global pandemic kind of thing, and trying to figure out how to bring community together but keep people socially distant, and how to kind of maneuver through all of that. So of course, utilizing the technology is great, and even obviously incorporating that into designs with solar and wind and geothermal heating and cooling and all of that really cool stuff. But yeah, how do we navigate bringing community together when we're told to kind of stay apart? And that right now is the most challenging thing for me.
Yeah. What would you say to people that, I know sometimes I'll get stuck in this mentality, and it's kind of like I'll be healthy when I have more resources available to me. Or like you're like, oh, I really want this healthy thing at the store, but why the heck does it have to? Why do we pay way more for healthy things? And I guess when the chips are down, sometimes. I mean, I prioritize healthy food way more than I feel like a lot of people do.
Yeah.
Because I think of it as like you've got to put that premium fuel in your tank. But I literally like was choosing between organic and not organic, or just different products at the grocery store last night. I was like, I don't have the luxury of choosing this.
I think that's a really great question.
What would you say to people that are like?
Well, I've pondered that myself, and it always goes back to your state of health and well-being. If you think about our healthcare industry and the monetary input that goes into that, and trying to take care of people who are sick specifically because of their lifestyle choices, and how we're almost enabling that kind of mentality, and essentially the funds that go into the healthcare department, and how we value what that means, and going back to food provisions being a very noble profession, because your health, like I said, is what's going to move you through this world. If you're disabled, or you have diabetes, whatever it is, and you can't function at an optimal level, and your quality of life is poor because of it, for me, that's where the money should be. Your dollar is your vote, and I feel like if more people were on board with that, and making sure they're spending their money voting on a life of society that they truly want to support, I think that's going to bring the costs down on its own, and then essentially not putting so much funds into healthcare and disability for people. Another thing with those foods, especially as young children being introduced to a certain lifestyle of eating, it becomes the normal. Even if you're eating a salad, but it's iceberg lettuce with bacon and cheese and ranch dressing.
Sugar in it.
Exactly. Like, what are you actually eating? But that's the normal. Or you don't like mushrooms because the only mushrooms you've been exposed to are the white button mushrooms from the grocery store.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with this white button.
No, there's not. But if that's all you have to base your opinion on, you're like, I hate mushrooms. The nutritional value of mushrooms, how important that is, and then the diversity in flavor and texture, and how it can be a substitute for many other types of food, meat in particular. So it's just introducing these new old things to people, and giving them a new perspective. Like, all lettuce isn't the same, all carrots aren't the same. An organic carrot, it might have some deformities or look a little bit smaller than what you find at the grocery store, but the nutrient density is going to be much greater, and the flavor profile is going to be more diverse.
I think what some people are confused by is, unfortunately, there's not a ton of clarity. Like, is coffee good or bad for you? Or that's a bad example. There's so many different things that come out, and it's like, even when you say organic, like, we need more agreement on these things. When you say organic, when you said free range, when you say cage free, I mean, you could say eggs are cage free, and literally have a 5-foot area for these like anemic chickens to that are so fat to walk out. They've never seen the light of day, so they're not going to walk out.
Right. Yeah, that transparency is so important. And then I would go even further into, if you're eating meats and eggs and all these things, get to know your local farmer. Like,
I think that's key, is local.
Yeah, get to know them personally. Go tour the farm, see how they operate, be a part of that. It's like I said, it's your food, it's fueling you. Go get your hands dirty and spend the day out on the farm, and really have that relationship with your food. And that's another thing that we're so disconnected from. If if you're growing the food, or you know the person that's growing the food, and you have a personal relationship with them, it's going to just be better for your body and the environment altogether.
I think anybody that should get to know farmers and like where their food comes from. It is tough. I'd say what would you say, co-ops, or what is it, the boxes of produce that you have that you get?
So that would be a CSA, a community share agriculture. I'm not doing that currently. I'm just providing to chefs.
But that's a good way to get into knowing some of your farm, because a lot of people are like, how do you do that? How do you get to know your farmer? I think a CSA is a really good way to support. Yeah. It supports the farmer even if they had a bad year in a certain
Exactly. And then you're going to be able to try things that you haven't really had access to before, because it is what's available, what's in season, what's local, and you kind of just get this pre-made box of selections that's available on the farm. And I think that's great too, because you just pay your membership fee, and then you have a surprise box of,
you get what's in season,
local produce. Yeah, it's going to be so much better for you.
I wanted you to, before we got off, explain the Ecovillage a little more.
Sure.
Did you want to talk about that?
Yeah.
And the concept, and like more how, also, people are listening from around the country, how they would get involved in such a thing, start their own, or kind of the decision-making process. And
sure. So I'm working with a client specifically who is the property owner in Kershaw, South Carolina, who had a vision of creating this eco-village on her property site. So I've been working with her for the past 8 months. We've done food forest design projects. The next project for her is rainwater catchment and diversion systems, solar installation, outdoor kitchen, and then a 3 to 5 year plan for that property is the design and installation of the Eco Village with central kitchens, perimeter gardens, and then small eco huts or cabins for people to either long-term stay as like wolfing opportunities for people who just want to.
Which is what? Can you explain that?
Wolfing is worldwide opportunities on organic farms. So it is an exchange to room and board in exchange for your time and energy helping to steward the land.
And can you just say what a eco village is real quick too, for people that don't know?
Eco village would be a community that is going to be off the grid. We are supplying our own resources. We are building our own homes, growing and cooking our own food, and creating a community dynamic based around that. If you would like to get involved, I want to encourage everyone to become a member of Down to Earth Co-op and Lifestyle Center. You can go online to my website, downtoearthcoop.com/become a member. There's an annual fee for that. We do offer 10% off all wildcrafted merchandise, 25% off on our workshops, and you'll get a free Down to Earth t-shirt for when we have our call to action. Our call to action days are community volunteer events where we're picking up trash at roadways or waterways, and then doing garden installs or garden work. So just to get people more involved and start to steward their land and start to become more ecologically responsible.
If you had, do you have a few favorite principles of permaculture?
I do. Observe and interact. Observe is probably the most important, because if you don't have an understanding or a relationship, it really is about creating a relationship. And I've noticed this through my years working with the land. Nature is a beast, and it has its will and it has its way. So for us as designers is to really study that And working with water in particular, a lot of my clients have erosion issues, or they just want to divert water, within their property. But you might think you're moving water in one direction and it'll have a mind of its own. So what I do specifically is I tell my clients, I'm going to watch this land for a year before I even start designing anything. So I sit there when it's on rainy days and I take notes of where the water naturally wants to flow and then how I can kind of tweak it. And then another principle that I would say is my favorite is regulate and apply feedback. So based on all these observations, you're going to see, something else needs to be moved. Something else can be done. It's not a design implementation done. It's this constant going back, that feedback loop. What's happening now? The environment's always changing. We're changing. The weather's changing. Everything's changing. So we just have to learn to work with that and become a part of that and change with it.
Yeah. It probably would be of no surprise that some of my favorite things of it are engineering related.
Okay, what are they?
I was always fascinated with biomimicry. I started tripping out when I heard about that. I was just like, oh my God, you got cool. Billions of years of test case scenarios and evolution that made this a perfect machine. Mm-hmm. And so I thought of that stuff a lot in terms of designing homes, almost like termite mound dwellings that naturally air ventilate and machines to fly or whatever, renewable energy, all that kind of stuff. But I didn't realize how applicable it was to
everything.
Farming and those edge case scenarios, where the most fertile spots in a permaculture system are where you have two
the edge. That exchange.
Where you have the forest meet the field.
Because there's such an exchange. There's so much interaction happening in that space. It's like the coast of your continent.
If you can have more shoreline,
yes,
the water body may be the
maximizing
same,
that.
But if you can maximize the curves and have more linear feet,
very cool.
Scenario, then you have more biological exchange, and you actually have more that really happens. And when you see these monoculture farms, it's minimizing those edge scenarios. It's squares and perfectly round retention ponds and straight rivers, and it's disastrous, really. And then I like some of the some of those I guess you'd call it engineering, but keyhole gardens, where you maximize edges essentially, or you maximize how much area you can have, but also have access to it to farm it. It's kind of has a keyhole shape, and then it has a farm around it. Mm-hmm. And then the spiral herb gardens.
Oh yeah, I've designed and installed a couple of those.
Yeah, just some of those cool things I love to think about designing, and I love the idea of the food forest. Having the three sisters, like corn, beans, and squash. Except there's lots of other plants you can do that with.
And there's a fourth sister.
What?
There's a fourth sister, Cleome, also known as the spider plant. That is used to bring in pollinating insects to help pollinate your corn and your beans and your squash.
Yeah, but I'm sure there's a ton of different scenarios of different plants you could have. That's just what the natives.
Like guild planting, yeah.
Yeah, I love the idea of having lots of plants that are beneficiary planted together. And then we would even do this at a very industrialized greenhouse I worked at, was barrier plants that had pest-resistant properties. I was impressed because they would spray a lot of pesticide and chemical, which was terrible. But they also, it just shows the power of, they're like, this is free. We don't have to go pump this out on the plants every night. They had a whole thing of mums.
It's doing the work for you. That's what we're working towards.
See, the case we need to make this is what I'm convinced of.
Okay.
Is there was this uphill battle for the longest time with solar and wind and trying to make people feel bad and like, oh, this is bad for the environment and all this kind of stuff. The economics have shifted. It's cheaper to do solar now and winds than it is to build a coal plant. They're not building coal plants anymore. They're actually decommissioning them.
Oh,
It's
wow.
getting to the point where it's competitive with natural gas, and it's just going to keep getting better. And you've got BP now, like companies that are terrible companies in the past, like BP.
Putting in some solar wind farms.
BP's committed to going completely off of fossil fuels. It's like, what? Like, so we've got to make I'm convinced we got to make a capitalistic argument, which sounds terrible, but it's like, hey, if that's how we get people to put in permaculture principles, or like, you can get more out of an acre if you have lots of plants and you get a free, you don't have to buy all those expensive pesticides and stuff.
Well, Bill Mollison said something that sticks with me. He said part of the reasons he started permaculture and kind of created what permaculture is because he wanted to maximize hammock time. How do we maximize hammock time? So he said,
what, is that just chilling time?
Yeah, just enjoying our lives. Like, we're in such a state where we feel like our job and our work has to be this like grueling, mundane thing. And if we're not, like, if we're enjoying it, we're not working.
That's our fault, though. It's designed that way. Like, we were promised in like the 50s that everything would be automated by now and we'd just get to chill all the time.
Right.
It won't ever happen because the more free time that's freed up, that you just keep working, you just become more productive, but you don't actually get paid more.
Yeah, we definitely, as humans, we find things to occupy ourselves. But
we've been bred to want more and more stuff, which I think caters into the permaculture lifestyle, is not thinking of yourself as a consumer and actually giving back instead of waiting in the line at Walmart at 2 o'clock in the morning. You know, like, we are literally like conditioned to just want more constantly and then die.
It's that like stimulation, that endorphin rush, the dopamines of a new exciting thing that's going to hold your attention. Yeah, absolutely. And
I mean, we literally have like half a year like iPhone, like between a new phone, and it's like, what does it even do now?
Exactly.
It's a little bit better camera.
And then, I would pull in like meditation and spiritual practices, on the tail end of that, because.
Can we finish on that? I want to hear that.
Absolutely.
I think that's a good closer, is the one zone. What do you find most helpful?
Yeah, zone 0.
Or zone 0.
So my meditation practices, just sitting in silence, it really takes away that like need or desire, this kind of connection that we have to the material world, because really we're so much more than this physical vessel of flesh and tissue and bone. And because we have kind of been conditioned into this consumerist mentality, and how do we get that next stimulation, being able to sit with yourself and get to know yourself, essentially, you'll come to realize that your needs are met, and you don't have, there is a world of abundance. There's a lot of lack. The fear of lack. We
need to have a thinking of a world of abundance and not
we don't
shortage.
And we really have to change our mentality, because if you think about it, especially us as Americans, I hate to even say it, but we have everything we need. Even, I grew up really poor on food stamps and every other government assistance program, so that sense of lack was very real for me. But the power comes from the self, and the self is God and divinity. So when we reconnect with that and kind of shift our mindset into a world of abundance and step into it. I mean, you can think about it, but then on a physical plane, you got to walk into it and start creating that world that you want, and you'll really start to see things from a different perspective, and so things start to align and people come together and everything just starts to make sense.
I got into meditation. I mean, I've done some guided meditation, like up in Boone. But I'm actually more into, I read a book by Yuval Noah Harari, and he's really into meditation. And I listen to Sam Harris as well. And they talk about Vipassana meditation a lot. And so I do some of that.
Okay.
It's more just like focusing on the breath and like relaxing.
Okay.
And just kind of not thinking about anything really, instead of like a guided.
Yeah.
But I've liked that a lot. And then I think I did these sensory deprivation tanks, which were
very cool. I saw that. Yeah. How was
it?
Very,
very interesting. You know, you're in there for like an hour.
Wow.
I think Joe Rogan had those like outside of his podcast studio or something.
Yeah, and he was inviting all his friends over. He said you could come and hang out in my sensory deprivation.
It's trippy. It's cool. Like I like it a lot. It's just, I mean, you're in complete darkness. Even when I would meditate, you know, I would be sitting there. I'd sometimes put on music. There'd be some noise, some distraction, or you're uncomfortable, but you're literally floating. There's no pressure points. The water's the exact same temperature as your body, so it literally feels like being in a womb or something. So it's like,
that's
it's bizarre.
amazing.
Yeah.
And how like in tune can you really become with yourself when you don't have that external stimulus? It's all coming from within, and you can address it differently. You can ask different questions like, what does that mean? Why am I feeling this? And kind of dive a little bit deeper into knowing yourself. And
I reached a different level of meditation than I've reached before.
That's awesome. I can't wait to try it. Yeah.
Oh, it's so cool. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, stuff like that. I found acupuncture is really helpful too.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer. I say exercise, food, and then just mental ways of like de-stressing, and I would group a lot of those things into that. It's whatever works for you. Because I think stress is one of the most underestimated things, and I know I personally don't deal with that sometimes. So.
Yeah. Personal, like creative expression is a really, really good outlet for stuff like that.
Absolutely. Like if I didn't have all this during quarantine, I would just like explode.
Yeah, I encourage, creative expression in many, many different forms, whether it's dancing, music, art, poetry, permaculture designing, whatever it is, to kind of get that out there. It's so important to channel that, and it is part of your emotion. So being able to harness that in a really powerful way is inspiring.
I really hope we don't go back into any quarantine or anything like that. But I would highly recommend, if anything like this ever happens again, people make sure, in addition to your toilet paper and cans of food, you got to have passions and you got to have some outlets, because I think those are the people that did the best through all of this. I know it's like just feeling like you have some way to release some energy, and staying in contact with people and building a community. So thanks, Jasmine, for talking to us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mike.
Hope we stayed on topic a little bit.
I think we did good for the first one. I'm sure we'll have a couple more interviews, more topic specific. But
what would you like to talk about? As maybe a teaser for some future interviews. You were talking about foraging.
A big project that I have going on is a permaculture design and install. Currently, it is just down to earth funding this project. So again, I ask that people go to my website and become a member, purchase some of our wild-crafted merchandise. I do a lot of bone work. So whenever I'm out foraging and I find cool things, I'll make art and sell those items just to kind of support the business and our mission. So we're working with a landowner in Fort Mill to to cultivate that, installing some market gardens over there, and doing some more workshops and classes just so we have a more convenient location for our customer base in Charlotte. So big projects going on in Fort Mill, incorporation of community potlucks, obviously offering more workshops and classes within the area, and just supporting that ecology within Fort Mill and showing, that we can kind of create something. It's not Charlotte, it's not necessarily the city, but it is a reasonable distance. So trying to get that out there.
Well, I'd love to join you out on the farm and maybe, have some of that open source nature to be able to get some of the knowledge and stuff out there for people to really take advantage of and stuff like that.
Yeah,
and
perfect.
Foraging would be pretty sweet. And if you do mushrooms.
Yes, I'm going mushroom foraging today. I try to go every day. I'm always on the lookout, even driving down the road. I'm like checking out all the trees, and
I'd be too scared to just like pick things. And
I did get my wild mushroom certification, so legally I can go out and pick mushrooms and sell them to chefs and companies in Charlotte. I'm actually doing a collaboration with a couple of chefs at the City Kitch. So that's like a shared kitchen space. They do cooking demos. So we're working on a seasonal local menu, incorporating as many mushrooms as possible. Obviously, the cultivated mushrooms are a lot easier to get your hands on, opposed to.
I want to find some lion's mane.
Lion's mane is absolutely wonderful. I have cultivated that, but obviously the best lion's mane is what you're going to find out foraging.
Do you ever find ginseng?
I have not found ginseng.
Okay.
But
well, if I don't have another podcast, it's because I ate some bad mushrooms.
Okay.
I'm laying out in the woods somewhere. So,
Mike, I have in October, we're doing the mushroom inoculation workshop, and then we're going to do a mushroom ID hike. So go on my website to www.downtoearth.com/calendar of events, and you can keep up with whatever we have going on. It will be on that page.
Sounds fun. Get my healthy drink.
I just have water, but that's it. That's all I need, right?
Yep.
Anything else is a treat.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Great talking with you.
We'll be in touch.
Absolutely.
All right.
Enjoy the rest of your day.